There are 114 surahs or chapters within the Holy Qur'an, and of course that's by no coincidence. And if you're up to speed and following this channel, then it should be no surprise as to how we go about figuring that out. Now, of course, 100 is the number of absolute. 14, I believe, would be deciphered by 7 plus 7. 7 represents a week of time. A fulfilling of time, including a Sabbath day rest. So there are 2 weeks of time. So what this is telling us, that there are 114 surahs within the Quran, is that the Quran will be absolutely within standard church doctrine for 2 weeks of time, 2 fulfillments of time. So are we within that yet? I don't believe we are. The Christ worshiping truth about the Quran is only coming to light right now. So I think, or for the age of Aquarius to come, and I also believe for the second coming of Christ, the age of Sagittarius, when Moses comes. Now the last 14 or 15 chapters in the Holy Quran pertain surahs that are actually quite short, palpable and digestible within one reading or meditation. So with this understanding, I want to invite you to play a little game. Within these chapters and knowing the numerology, we could just very easily decipher the hidden message within these chapters that Allah is trying to tell us. For example, in Surah 113, right, of course, we all know 100 is a number for absolute. 13 is a number of rebellion. So what does this surah talk about? It talks about witchcraft. So very easily, quite indeed. Now the final surah in the Quran, 114, we've already talked about the fulfilling of 2 weeks of time. We should be able to see the underlying principle, the most prevalent underlying principle, while we are indefinitely worshiping and studying the doctrines out of the Quran. So what is that underlying principle that God expects of us? That is taking refuge within His holy name. Now His holy name is not, it goes beyond the barriers of language. It's the deity of Christ. It's the access to the Father. And to keep us from the wiles of the devil. That is probably the most prevalent principle we can learn from all the time Islam will rule and reign. Now I want to show you an anomaly, which is actually pretty interesting. Surah 112. 12, of course, is the number of the government. So we should be expecting to read about the government within Surah 112, the holy order of the government. But in fact, we actually read about the oneness of Allah. Why is that? We should be reading about the government because the government is the oneness of Allah. We've already discussed that when we will be studying the Quran in its absolution, will be at least in the age of Aquarius and the second coming of Christ. And we know when Christ comes and the times that we live in now, the oneness of Allah will be found within His governmental authority. The oneness that we see in John 17, and we see this in Surah 112 as well. It's actually quite amazing and a true picture of the times that we live in right now. So I want to invite you to consider these things.